Good morning. Welcome to today's morning meditation, the Sunday edition, and we're starting a new book this Sunday, the book of Daniel. Daniel is a book full of prophecy and amazing stories. It's thoroughly enjoyable to read in only 12 chapters, and if you haven't read it, I would suggest that you do. It is truly an amazing book, as you will see as we begin to get into some of its contents. So let's begin reading in Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the articles into the treasury house of his God. Then the king instructed Aspenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel, and some of the king's descendants, and some of the nobles, young men, in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies, and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. Now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacy, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief eunuch that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. And this is the verse we're going to key on for today. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and drink, for why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king. So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Please test your servants for 10 days. Let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacy. And as you see fit, so deal with your servants. So he consented with them in this matter and tested them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away their portion of the delicacies and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. As for these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. So in the beginning of this chapter, we're introduced to Daniel and his 3 friends who were taken captive and brought into Babylon. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And in verse 8, we see that Daniel says he purposed in his heart not to defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies. What Daniel was doing here is the food that was being given to them was food that was first offered to the pagan gods of the Babylonians. And Daniel, knowing that it was offered to those idols, did not want to partake of that food and in that manner defiling himself. So he makes a request to the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. And verse 9 is the key we want to look at. Now God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. Daniel is a captive in a foreign land. He has absolutely no power of his own. He has no leverage in this situation. He can't pull any strings. He is completely under the power of the Babylonians. But he wants to remain true to his God under those very difficult circumstances. Most people, having been taken away from their homeland, separated from their families, out of their culture, and in danger at any time of losing their head if they don't try to fit into this new culture, wouldn't even take a stand to try to be true to their faith and to their God, but would try to blend in with the Chaldeans any way they can to preserve their life. But Daniel and his 3 friends were different. They wanted to serve God. They had a desire to be true to God. And that's when he says he purposed it in his heart that he would not defile himself. But he had no way to prevent himself from becoming defiled, because the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, could say to him, look, this is the only food you're getting and you either eat it or you die. Then Daniel would have to make that kind of a choice and possibly lose his life, or then be forced by hunger to give in. But verse 9, we see God interceding. And God brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. God saw the heart of Daniel and his friends, and he knew their desire to be true to him and to serve him. And God would then allow them the means to be able to do that by giving them favor in a foreign land from people who were their captives, who had really no great love for the Jewish people. God put in that head of the eunuchs, the chief of the eunuchs' heart, a desire to take care of Daniel and his friends, and at least be willing to listen to their requests and try, if it were possible, to allow them to have a different menu. The point I want us to understand today is that if our hearts are right before God, and we desire to be godly on our job, we desire to be godly in our house, we desire to be godly in our culture, we are going to meet with opposition. The Word of God and the things of God are not loved by the world. They are mocked by the world, and many times they are treated hostilely by those in the world. But God calls us to live for Him in a sanctified manner. The Apostle Peter will tell the people that they are to be holy like God is holy. And we see that in the scriptures time and time again. It's in the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament, is again that we're to be holy like our God. We're to live a different type of life, a separate kind of life. And if we desire to do that, God has to make a way for us to be able to do that in the world. He has to give us the strength to do that, the conviction to do that. And many times in situations where we have no leverage or have no power, God will orchestrate the situation by which we can live a life sanctified to Him. But you have to have the courage and purpose it in your heart. You have to be willing to take that stand and see then how God will come into that situation and make the impossible happen. I encourage you, wherever you are, live your life for Christ. Don't conform to the world, but rather transform it by being a Spirit-filled Christian, living in this world, shining for Jesus Christ in the darkness. If you're in a situation where you feel pressured, where people are trying to force you to do something that you know is not right to do, bring it to God, purpose it in your heart, and watch how God will make a way for you to be true to Him. He looks over the whole world for people who He can be strong for on their behalf. And you can be one of them. And you'll find, like Daniel did, that God will give you favor and goodwill according to His purpose and according to His divine plan. We need to be courageous in this day. We need to stand for Christ in this very hour. And I believe when we do, God will give us the ability and the situation for us to be set apart and to shine for Him when our hearts are true. Have a great day, guys. Bye.